We may have another guest today.
Audio check. Testing one, two, three. Audio check.
Yep,
Alrighty. Who the guest?
Shawn Murphy.
Aha. Like I said, I haven't seen him in about over a decade, maybe a decade and a half.
That's close to the same for me, though he did come to my house. Um, I'm going to say 12, possibly 13 years ago, and we went on a drive in the Bay Area. He's right now he's in British Columbia.
Oh, no kidding.
I think he's great. I'll just chime in there.
Is he in Vancouver or elsewhere in BC?
So I don't know.
You mean now, presently? He's in
Right.
Vancouver.
He's not in Vancouver, I don't think.
Well, he's in Canada somewhere.
He's in British Columbia, which narrows it down to one of those little blocks.
Okay. And how did you set his expectations for what would happen here?
Oh, I told him all about Barry.
Okay.
I'm going to be blunt, Barry. I told him that I thought that you were one of those brilliant geniuses that's somewhat on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, probably true.
I suspect we all are.
I'm not.
Oh, all right.
Hi, Shawn.
Shawn Murphy, how goes?
You're muted.
I believe you are muted.
Can we hear me now?
Yes.
Hello, all. Hi, Sam. Hi, Stacy. Good Lord, and Jack.
I did forget what year we actually ran across each other.
Oh God, it was a while ago. It would have been about 2012 or so, I think might have been the last time.
Was it in the LSIG or SVELC as it's currently known? I think it was.
Uh, if I don't know those acronyms, but I think in the Unfinished Revolution context.
Oh, did you come to Program for the Future conferences then?
I think I came to a couple of the meetings in the what's that low slung little building there? Second story, really an older building that I think has been rather storied. There were I think some ancient startups that happened in it. I don't remember the name of it. Um, where the hell was that? It was just a really small group, half a dozen people around.
Was it Plug and Play Center in Sunnyvale?
Oh, I think had Mouse development going on there or something. Maybe I'm not sure.
Man, it really shows how old my brain cells are.
You and me both, brother. Hi, Barry. I
Hi,
think this is
Shawn.
the first time we've met. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've never met before.
No.
All
Where
right.
where are you where are you living, Barry?
I'm in the suburbs of Boston in a town called Bedford, sort of nestled between Lexington and Concord, but not famous because Bedford was a hotbed of Tories in the Revolutionary period.
You're not a Tory, are you?
No, no, I'm very liberal.
Yeah.
Glad we've got that cleared up.
Yeah.
I'm in British Columbia in Canada.
Okay.
We were wondering where in BC, because I'm actually just between Seattle and Vancouver.
On the coast there. Um, I am do you know just north of Oroville and yeah, sort of central. Right on the border though. We're right on the border. Uh in the US it's Apple Country.
No, I don't know Oroville. I know a different Oroville, but not that Oroville.
Yeah, no, you know the California Oroville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry to keep going
Here,
on. Driving from Vancouver to your location, how long does that take?
It's about a four, it's about a five. You're supposed to drive it in about 5 hours.
Okay,
I
I get it.
was careful not to report how quickly I drive it.
Well, I want to thank Jack for inviting you, and Stacy also for speaking so highly of you, and me for barely remembering, our interaction in the past. But let me
No
also
worries.
acknowledge, hey, Heiner, how goes? Heiner is in Berlin, and Heiner has been,
Oh,
oh man, he's on the forefront of a lot of different initiatives and focus areas and groups and innovations. And Heiner's been at it for probably what, 5 or 6 decades now, Heiner?
That's all rumors.
I spread that rumor, okay?
I'm surprised we missed each other in Berlin, Heiner. I've been there since about 2017, and I'm visiting my parents in Canada just the last few months.
Well, I somehow saw your name somewhere, but you
Oh,
see,
weird.
Berlin and the world is a big place.
It is a very big place.
Okay. Well, just before you got here, I was asking because Stacy's mentioned you, Jack's mentioned you, and since Jack invited you, I was thinking, hey, what did Jack set as far as your expectations go for this particular session? I don't
Well,
want to disappoint anyone's expectations here.
uh, this is it's so early. This is kind of like a before hours club. So God only knows what happens in this. I am an enthusiastic proponent of collaboration at scale. So anyone interested in collaboration is a friend of mine. So one of my corporate entities is a thing called Neuron Collaboratory Incorporated in Canada. I have a German presence as well. So, but yes, so collaboration.
Did you say Neuron Collaboratory?
Correct. Nooron,
Nooron.
where the OO is a nod to noosphere.
Yes, yes. Okay, good. All right. Jack, Stacy, you guys want to do any more of a context setting here?
I don't, maybe Shawn wants to just say what he's working on.
Sure. Yeah, if this is the time for such things. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I'm I would submit that computer science has been trying to solve the wrong problem for a long, long time. And that problem has been we've got some knowledge and we just need to put it someplace. But that disrespects the true life cycle of knowledge. So I would submit that these truths that need to be stored are something that we don't even really have. We've got a bunch of candidate truths, and we need to keep racing them. What we really need is a technology that supports our collective sense making, that supports the process by which we pursue knowledge. And that's a very different requirement than the one that has been tacitly and really sort of accidentally accepted by computer science to date. Fundamentally, it's a deep philosophical problem, grounded in basically the positivist context of 100 years ago. So there's that. So,
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I've been working for too long now, of course, as we're all long of tooth here. But I've developed technology to take a different approach to that. And so what it does is it strives to be a place in the cloud where we can curate our understandings together. This is quite distinct from let me take back that word understandings. I think that's not quite accurate. I would submit that what this ought to be called is perhaps the merged mental model, the MMM. If the WWW is this distributed technology for storing these speech acts that we fling at each other in all sorts of different media, including HTML. Lovely as it is, it's still just an embodiment of a bunch of speech acts. What the MMM is instead a repository for the mutual curation of our merged mental models. So my view on this is essentially that we each have this lovely graph of notions, nodes, all interconnected via relations and associations in our heads. And when we speak with one another or engage in other speech acts in writing or document preparation or whatever, what we're doing is we're in effect slinging edit lists, proposed edit lists at one another. And as we converse, what we're doing is we're handshaking to establish terminology that we share and contexts that we share to ground the speech acts that we fling at back and forth at one another. And so those speech acts are transient, they're ephemeral, they're contextualized by the moment that we are operating in. And as a consequence, they are in effect disposable. They're ephemeral. But what they are is just this cheap dilution and of the complex network mental models that we carry around with us. And so imagine a different world where we've got a place where we can knit together our mental models. When I see that there's something missing in our shared mental model, I can add to that, and as can you, as can we all. And so yeah, so that container needs to be one that can store contradiction, because of course our understanding, individual, our own understandings change through time, right? That's called learning. And so that merged mental model, of course, is going to contain other things. It's going to contain things grounded in fever dreams and paranoia and lies and propaganda and intentional misinformation, disinformation, and so on, right? It needs to, uh, that's the reality of the human experience, of the collective human experience, that our emissions contain all of those kinds of malodorous information as well, right? So if we've got this this container of our merged mental model, then what that does is it means that there's a whole new class of experiences that we can have with our information. And so that means we can operate cognitively rather than at the data level. So instead of performing operations at the data level, such as insertion and updates and sorting, instead we can be performing operations collectively with, in effect, live ideas all connected together. We can be performing operations such as assessment and decision making and evaluation and reflection and right, these cognitive operations. And those cognitive operations then will be actual computer executable first class activities in this computational arena in the cloud. So that's what I'm making.
Just before Heine goes, I just want to say thank you. And you made that so understandable. That's the most understandable I've ever had anybody express that. So I appreciate that.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Stacy. It's taken much incomprehension from all my previous listeners. So to all of them, I apologize.
Shawn, I also have to apologize. You approached through LinkedIn me 5 years ago and mentioning Tony Judge, and I have overlooked your message. So it's a small world. That's how this name rang familiar. I have a question. I mean, this is far out, very much needed. Mental models do not seem to exist. I learned in the mid 90s, and now we are merging and morphing and connecting mental models. So I'm very interested also in what you were just saying on collective cognition and negotiations or whatever you can do when you have shared repositories. My question, in how many languages do you do it? And how do you handle different contexts in different cultures?
Yeah. Okay, so are you familiar with WordNet? Yeah.
That's the name, yes.
Okay, so WordNet is an ongoing lovely project out of Princeton University, where for 30 years ago or something, they got together and some linguists and computer science scientists got together and established a dictionary thesaurus of the English language. And they ended up realizing that since one of one word and since three of some other word converged at some particular meaning. And so they were synonyms of one another, these words. And so they established then a data structure called a syn set, where the syn set is the synonym set. It is that set, really, it's a node, a meaning node that's connected to the bunch of words that synonymously share that meaning. And then they realized, OMG, oh my God, this can be a bridge between languages. And so they've since extended their project to include 25 or 30 or something human natural languages, all connected down at the sin set, down at the meaning level, uh, and so that's been transmogrified. It's been expressed as an RDF OWL export. So it is, oh, and it can be interactive. It can be accessed interactively. So my sense is that when we're dealing with matters that have not otherwise been treated with explicit formal OWL style ontologies, that we can fold that users will be conducted when expressing themselves through a user experience that will disambiguate their expressions at source. So imagine interacting with a system and trying to express something into it that isn't already confined by a tabular database-like experience. This text supports that too. But what if you're trying to reach out and sort of say something novel and usual in a context? One will have the opportunity to basically access um, access the meaning nodes available in WordNet as a fallback to support multilingual um, disambiguation at source. And of course, that doesn't cover everything because one wants to be able to, of course, express notions that don't already have words for them, right? So then we basically have to fall back on classic folksonomic approaches where we hope that people have where we support people in finding shared sense, but have to do so rather informally. Does that?
Okay. We cannot continue here to any depth. I think we should have a one-on-one or a special
Yeah,
session, and
I'd love.
maybe only take the question: have you come across Ingolstadt Dauberg and her switching systems?
No.
No. Okay, it's enough for this environment. It's very easy to go very, very deep. And again, sorry, I should connect to all my contacts and see if there are offers I overlooked. So
I
anyway,
know.
thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
I would love to connect with Anthony Judge if there was any possibility of you smoothing such a connection.
Oh, Tony would like to know you.
What you mean by smoothing?
I've reached out to him by email, but something in my vocabulary triggered him to dismiss the offer of communication. So
Well, it is not easy. We can talk about it.
So Shawn was talking at the high level to turn it a little bit more technical. Um, when I met him, he was using something called OKBC, which is Open Knowledge Base. It's basically an SQL for ontologies, and it came out of Stanford's Ontolingual project. So Shawn was there before Deborah McGinnis sold out and went to the Owl people, and uh, he was messing with some of the earliest days of knowledge processing, which was being pushed at Stanford.
yeah, I've actually implemented OKBC in a like the stack in four different programming languages and maybe five or six different times. Yes, it's an approach I'm familiar with. Let's put it that way.
Here's another off the wall question. Your first 3 second or 0 second response to prologue slash data log.
Uh, oh God. You know what? That's sort of an avenue I haven't really pursued very much with respect to this whole matter. I guess that's why is that? That's because I'm more concerned with human knowledge processing and lofting the human experience and capturing that and basically putting that on an exponentially uh, um, powered Moore's law powered trajectory than I am on the formal reasoning that the prologue approach is ideally suited to. So that's I'm trying to put a rocket sled under human collective cognition because and it isn't just it isn't just because it isn't just because it needs it. Why is it? It's it's because it's because for us to have faith in a process, for us to be invested in it, we need to know that our voice can have an impact too, right? We need to know that it's a place that's accepting of our inputs for us to be invested in it. And so oracles that emit truth don't appeal to everybody, especially those who want to participate in their sense making.
Okay, so just a quick note. I have lots of follow up on that, but Stacy has her hand up, and then obviously I want to hear from Barry too, since he was featured in the invitation.
Yeah, just a quick question, probably for Jack or Barry. Can you just tell me the difference very simply between prologue and data log?
Prologue came first. Prologue is a logic language that's very terse. You get to make statements, and then you get to make rules, and then you can use those rules to to resolve the statements as you wish. But Prologue had um, certain complexities, and I'm not. This is out of my the point is that Prologue ran the risk of not finishing, not doing what it was supposed to do. And Datalog came along, actually by a guy named Rich Hickey, who invented the closure language. So Datalog was first implemented in closure at a company called Datomic, and it's basically Prologue, but it will stop. It will do its job, but it may not do it as well as Prologue does. So let me give you an example. If if you have uh, um, a statement that Sue is the sister of of Jim, and now you want to write a rule that says siblings equals sister of or brother of. Now you could say a new statement that Sue is a sibling of Jim, and it allows you to reason about these statements that you make. That's the simplest way to explain it.
That's the data one or the pro one?
Both of them.
Both of them. Okay. So what, I guess so what's the major difference? Like the second one that came along, the data one, what did that do differently? Or like, why is it different?
It made some simplifying assumptions on what the underlying inference engine could do. And because of that, uh, there are things that it cannot do that Prolog can do, but Prolog is dangerous because they have this thing called a cut set where the programmer who's writing it will say, "Okay, damn it, I want it to stop," and so I'm going to insert a cut set in somewhere in my program that forces it to stop, knowing that it didn't want to. So that's really simplistic and possibly wrong. But Prolog got Datalog is simply a subset of the reasoning powers of Prolog.
Okay. So is it fair to say that data log is more specific?
No, I don't think I no, the word general and specific don't quite apply. Uh, but you're now pushing me out of way
Okay.
out
I
of
got enough.
okay.
Sean looks like he wants to add something though.
Well, there's I'm familiar with Prolog, having fooled around with it decades ago. It's an essential part of the history of all of this kind of information processing for sure. But there's another angle on this issue of ending. uh, que Jack was pointing out how with Prolog, one can ask questions that, well, it never comes back from, it never answers, it never finishes, and that's a fundamental. Is that a fundamental property of first order predicate logic, or is it second that exposes us to the unendingness problem? But the way that's addressed over in OWL RDF, in OWL, is that is through the introduction of a technology called description logics, where what it does is it defines diverse sets of types of assertions that can be made and links them to their performance characteristics with respect to this matter of exposing you to queries that don't respond. So it means then that you can choose to confine yourself to assertions that keep you within the realm of finishability of endability of queries.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
that my sense is that followed it's a much more formal disciplined approach to what it sounds like data log does.
Sam, can I jump in for just a sec? Um, Barry has a very nice explanation. Prologue is known is in the chat. Prologue is known to get stuck on unproductive loops that never converge. Okay, so the new word for that is decidability. And that's what happened to Deborah McGinnis and the the Ontolog project at Stanford. It got abandoned when description logics came along because, oh my God, now we can be decidable. And that's basically data log is the decidable version of Prolog. And so both of them suffer. John Soa is the guy you'd want to go to read about this, because he is both a Prolog and an SQL guy, as well as an ontology guy, but not an OWL guy. He rejects decidability, and he says we don't need to be safe. Um, so that's it. Sam, it's your turn.
Many things to follow up on. Primarily, I was curious just to try and draw some clouds around the interests of various people. But Stacy, I actually have a much simpler version of that answer. But just as a nod towards the human side of things, I was curious, since I brought up Prolog and Datalog, why you directed your question at Jack and Barry. So let me just put that aside. But let me just then answer the question. Prolog, you could say, is 5 or 6 decades old. Datalog is arguably one, maybe 1.5 decades old. It's the modern version of a logic programming language, and it is scalable. So Prolog is backward chaining, which is part of the technology with which it tries to ascertain truth. But Datalog actually has a lot of modern, let's say, developments and innovations that bring it into the 21st and 22nd century. So remember the guy that talked about, man, I shared a couple of Rich Hickey's videos here, and I think you actually experienced one of them with
Yes.
some positivity. Yeah. So Rich is the brilliant guy that did, as Shawn discuss closure, or Jack, whether it was one of them, invented closure, and then also took logic programming and put it into the modern age. I asked the question because it is a way to get a representation that gives us the power, in my opinion, of containing all of these thoughts that humans think, okay? Whereas Prolog didn't quite understand enough its own limitations, and it had this problem of executing things exponentially and therefore not coming back and answering the question. Datalog, unlike modern quote unquote databases that emerged from the 1980s, doesn't require that you have this fixed set of definitions which people often call a schema. Hey, Kayla. And so because you don't have this fixed set of declarations that talk about what you can talk about, to me, it's much more general. So anyway, that's how I would answer the question, but maybe that's less or more understandable than others. But that would be my take on it.
That's a good answer.
And then,
Sam,
yeah, Stacy, you had another follow-up?
I was going to ask you if I could answer your first question real quick with one
Mhm.
sentence.
Mhm.
The reason I asked for Jack or Barry is that in the past, they're very good, in my opinion, of addressing a question really simply at like a fifth grade level. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted something that would be easily understandable to somebody that has no idea what you're talking about. So I just focused on the two of them for that reason.
So Stacy is scared of Sam?
No, I'm not scared of Sam, but he can go on. He could you got you he can go on different tangents or maybe not directly answer the part that I wanted heard. I mean, well, I didn't mean anything, any disrespect or anything. Shawn could have answered it too. I just knew that those are both Jack and Barry seem to have a lot of experience explaining things to young people, and I wanted to be answered as if I were a young person.
Okay. Kayla, welcome. We're also greeting Shawn Murphy, who hails from, I think, 4 or 5 hours north of Vancouver in BC. And by the way, Shawn,
On the
Kayla,
border.
yes, on the border. Okay, so you must have a view of the water. Okay, good. And
Yeah, we look right down into the States here, right out our front window. So
Well,
okay.
you're going to be the 51st state someday, so
Wait,
I
wait, wait,
wonder.
wait, 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 wait a minute.
but not in our lifetime.
No, 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 no. I'd rather be taking Washington, Oregon, California into Canada as Cascadia. Okay, I'm one of them. Okay.
you're so welcome, Sam. We'd love to have you. Please join us.
I really wish some well-meaning police state would come and liberate us from this current administration. Really. Anyway, I was saying Kayla is in Southern California. So Kayla's in Ventura County, and Kayla's been also a very frequent participant here as well, probably for 4, 5, 6 years now. Stacy's, I think, even longer than that, I think. So anyway, just want to say, Kayla, welcome. We're talking to Shawn Murphy, who was invited by Jack and has been positively described by Stacy in previous calls. And so we're glad that Shawn is here today.
Hi,
Kayla's
Kayla.
about to be our maybe 52nd, 53rd president. I think she's well on her way towards governmental leadership.
Nah, I don't know how anyone can do this without flipping out from time to time.
Anyway, she's in the hot cohort of community leaders in Ventura County now.
Yeah, I am. But anyways, welcome Shawn. Just a little bit of background. I found GCC just because I needed to connect with some human beings during the pandemic, and that's how I found you guys. I was invited by a guy named Josh. He still comes on from time to time, but I think Sam drove him away. But I am also a single mom. I am here in Southern California in Ventura County, just like everybody said. And I'm often uh, not, I don't put my camera on anymore because I have to multitask. My weekends are just for me and my kids, and I try to make time to do some of the fun stuff that I want to do, which is to hang out with you guys for a couple of hours in the morning. But right now we're spring cleaning so that I can buy my growing teen some clothes. So I will be offline and listening mostly.
Nice. Well, very nice to meet you.
Maybe we can go to Barry now, see if he has any thoughts. He's been very quiet.
Yeah, I tend to put my thoughts in the chat. Um, so I can go back and remember what it was that I was thinking. So let me back up to do this in sequence. So when Shawn was talking about merging mental models, I wrote down some notes. So in the context of merging mental models, the first comment I wrote down in the text is, this is almost half an hour ago. One relevant task, rooting out popular misconceptions which tend to misguide our cultural practices. Because among our mental models, we have erroneous mental models, which I tend to call misconceptions. So identifying and rooting out misconceptions is an important, relevant task in combining and sifting and sorting mental models. So then I refined that by writing an especially challenging task is to identify bogus axioms, which are central and potentially fatal misconceptions. And in our culture, we have axiomatic beliefs which have lately been discovered to be bogus, but they're still present because the people who discovered them are so obscure, like mathematicians, that nobody pays attention to them. So identifying bogus axioms, and I have one in particular that I work on all the time without really making any progress on. So then the next comment I made about merging mental models, I said, now in particular, when you're merging mental models, you have this table full of competing alternative mental models. Consider two extremes in this challenge. The first extreme is the easy one. You have mutually consistent, perhaps even congruent mental models arising from separate origins. They really say the same thing, but in different language. So you don't recognize that they're identical because they're using different vocabulary, different terminology, but they're essentially mutually consistent, even congruent. And so that's the great case of merging mental models, so that two different sects which have the same idea in different languages now have the possibility of joining together as a team that uses a common language for the same idea. The opposite extreme is mutually inconsistent mental models, where at least one of them must be wrong. Resolving competing and mutually inconsistent mental models is a major challenge for humankind. And this is what we often see in politics, where you have political schools of thought which are mutually inconsistent, competing, and you basically, people pick one and then they keep pushing with it, and they have the competing one and they never resolve which, if either, should be discarded first. And maybe both of them are wrong. Then, as Jack pointed out, when the topic of prologue came up, I mentioned that prologue is a rules-based logic language which tries to assemble a sequence of legal steps to reach a specified goal. So if you think something like a children's board game like checkers or something, you have a small number of legal moves that are always available. And the question is, which one should I choose to reach a goal, which is to say, in this case, to win? And that turns out to be a challenge to assemble a sequence of legal steps which reaches a specified or desired goal. And when I first got a copy of the prologue language, I got a copy of Borland prologue way back in the early 90s. And I wanted to test my ability to program in it. So I took a very basic intelligence test that dated back to the 1920s. It's known as the monkeys and bananas problem. I thought I would program the monkeys and bananas problem into prologue. In this challenge, a monkey enters a room and there's a bunch of bananas hanging from a hook on the ceiling. And elsewhere in the room, there's a stool. And the legal moves are, you can move anywhere you want in the room. If you happen to be where the stool is, you can either climb on it or push it to another location. If you happen to be on the location where the stool's underneath the bananas, you can climb on it and get the bananas. So you write down, it's like 5 legal moves. And I gave the 5 legal moves to prologue in the obvious order of the most important rule first. And right away, it found the exact sequence efficiently. Then, as a matter of intuition, I said, I'm not going to change the rules. I'm just going to list them in a different order, putting the least important rule mentioned first and the most important rule mentioned last. And what do you know? Prologue went into a loop. It kept pushing pushing the stool around the room forever and never getting them in the right order. And I go, now I understand why rules-based expert systems are so brittle. And that was my one and only introduction to Prolog, where I realized what his problem was. It doesn't have a metric which says if you're getting closer to the goal on some metric. If you're climbing a staircase, you can tell by your elevation that you're getting higher. But if you don't have a metric that says that this step is closer to the goal than that step, then you can end up moving haphazardly and you have no metric saying, am I getting closer? And Prolog has no memory of looping and no metric. And that's one of the reasons that it's so brittle and doesn't do the job. See, I think, and that's all I think I had to say in my notes.
The one of your cases where you have mutually congruent models, but they're in different languages, that was my PhD research work.
Very important.
And the objective was when you have a collection of speech acts or statements in on some subject, like, for example, what are the causes of climate change? And then you have all of these speech acts that are claims of what are causal. Um, the canonical example would be somebody says, well, CO2 causes climate change, and somebody else says climate change is caused by carbon dioxide. And that's Barry's mutually congruent models, but in different languages. They're actually both in English, but they use synonyms.
Yeah.
But they also did one other thing. One of them was expressed in the active sense, and one was expressed in the passive sense. And so you can't just take string comparisons and land at it's because the predicate, one was causes and the other is caused by. And so there's a lexical rule that you have to apply to it, which says, okay, if you're going to turn this passive predicate to the active predicate, you have to swap the subject for the object. And when you do that, you end up with the canonical form of both of them, CO2 caused climate change, or whichever synonym you choose to substitute. And that was the origin story of Open Sherlock. It's what I was doing for my PhD.
Newton and Leibniz co-invented the calculus simultaneously with different notation. Now, it wasn't too long before they realized that you could do either notation and they were compatible, but there were two different systems. And if you looked at them naively, you wouldn't realize that they were compatible and mutually congruent, just different notations.
May I ask what what mission this group believes itself to be on?
Sam, go ahead.
I was about to go into that after I responded to about 5 other points, but let me address that one first. That's why I sort of asked initially the first question, which is, under what context were you invited? I call this, I just invited you to a Facebook group called Co-Sense Making and Deep Grokking. Okay. And the reason I wanted to create that group in the first place, and I'll describe this particular session, okay, is that I get very frustrated. I am a very frustrated person. Okay. I am not high EQ. I allow my frustrations to get to me because I hear a bunch of bullshit and I say, how can people put up with that bullshit? Whether it's lies, whether it's hypocrisy, whether it's beliefs, whether it's, false heuristics, whether it's just autocracy, whether it's, just socially acceptable. I find all of that holding back understanding and holding back mutual communication and actually any of this positive mental merging that we've been talking about. So I call this co-sense making so that we can actually, with either scientific principles, with systems thinking, with rational thought, with critical thinking, with model-based reasoning, with mathematics, with physics, you know, with any of those frameworks, and they're all compatible, by the way. Whether we can actually then dig into some of the phenomena that we hear that goes by. Like, oh, well, that wasn't classified. We didn't send anything classified. You know, any 5-year-old can make better sense out of what happened this past week than any of these liars that are, just given so much media time. And I created this group so that we could unpack it as a group, so that we could actually just get to the root of all of this bullshit and try and figure out what better foundation we can have in order to create that better collaboration. One of the words, by the way, that I coined, I believe I coined way back in, I don't know, 2009 or something like that, is this word collaborology, which to me is the principles, practices, lessons, tools, and artifacts of scalable, successful collaboration. And I heard the word scalable in your introduction as well, and also the word collaboration. So I think that's probably where we had some mutual interest in the past. And just to be very candid, I think this is a direct outgrowth of some of the work that Doug Engelbart did, which inspired Jack also, by the way. And so Doug, of course, you may be aware, invented this thing called a mouse that most of us push around the desk, every day. And he did it not because he was a technologist. Oh, by the way, he also invented multimedia, windowing systems, word processing, document editing,
Boarded keyboard.
remote. I'm getting to that, Barry. Remote computing, all of that was pioneered by Doug and his team at SRI way back in the 60s. And he had actually thought of this even earlier than that. So anyway, he did invent other devices which are not as well known. The mouse is another one. The rat, the mouse is successful, but the rat, which is pushed around by your foot, or there's other devices that were pushed around by your knees, weren't quite as successful as the corded keyset.
The corded keyboard, yeah.
That's right. The corded keyset. I actually learned how to type on the corded keyset way back in the 90s because I was working with Doug in the early 90s. Now, the reason I introduced Doug is because, he doesn't think of himself as a technologist. He thought of himself as someone who wanted to bring collaboration technologies to humanity so that we could solve bigger problems than we could by our own selves. Okay? And he thought in order to do that, we had to have information sharing. So he was one of the very earliest who was actually on this IT, information technology forefront. So anyway, the reason for a lot of this is
here's the handy. Well, this is the handy key corded keyboard and mouse. There's a mouse as well up here on the thing. It's crazy one-handed, really.
Run it with one set of fingers. I presume that's what. Right. Yeah, anyway, so let's talk about that later. Anyway, so the reason for this group is as an offshoot of Doug's work, okay? Doug said, well, there's the technology side, which he called the tool system side, and then there's the human system side, okay? And that as technology evolves, what he saw way too often was people didn't understand it, okay? So people did not evolve their way of thinking when we got new capabilities from the technologies that we developed, okay? For example, this is an example he gives a lot. Why do we still think in terms of pages online? Online, we don't have page limitations physically, but for people's mental models, it helps them because that's all they understand, okay? And it's a long time before these single page applications became the, vogue, but way before then, it was always click this and you got another, roughly a screen full of things. And you click something else and you got roughly another screen full of things. And then the whole point was it above or below the, what do they call it? The cutoff line, whatever. Okay.
The
People
full.
problem of thinking in old metaphors and old analogs rather than learning what was now possible. Likewise, the fact that you could actually have a graph once you actually created links, it's not something most people understand. Most people don't even use the word graph when they talk about, the web and what it's doing. So anyway, the human system side of what Doug was talking about needs to evolve so that we can take advantage of our tools. Otherwise, we ourselves are the limitation, not the tools. Okay. So he recognized that very early. And so I thought, well, geez, there's 1 billion people in Silicon Valley, 1 billion people in everywhere else working on technology, but Doug could not find people to talk about the human system side of things. He was in Silicon Valley. Whenever he brought it up, VCs got a glazed look over their eyes. Okay. You brought it up, CEOs and technologists say, wow, I can take this one of 1,000, ideas. Big vision is this, and I can take this one idea, this mouse, and I can make $1 billion from it. I can take media and I can create this company called Creative Lab, and I can make $1 billion from it. I can take this word processing thing, very small thing, and I can create Microsoft Word and make billions of dollars from it. But he couldn't get people to talk about the human system side and how we needed to evolve ourselves. One of the other better examples is what runs boards of companies these days, okay? Roughly, it's still this thing called Robert's Rules of Order. You know how old that document is? It's roughly 150 years old, give or take a decade or two, okay? And people still run group meetings according to, okay, you've got 3 minutes, you got 2 minutes. Let's read the minutes from the last meeting, blah, 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 blah. What about flow? What about creating, shared mental models? What about creating shared mental maps, these graphs? What about having these visualized, knowledge structures that can float in space as we all work on it together, So he was posing these questions and he couldn't get people to talk to him about that. So I launched myself, even though I'm a Silicon Valley technology, professional. I launched myself into the human side system side of things. So that's why I said, let's figure out why. Okay, let's ask the question, why does not collaboration scale successfully? And through years and years of looking through these conversations, other conversations, one-on-one conversations, public discourse, et cetera, I created 2 lists. One list I call smart people problems. And that's why can you get 2 people together that very willing, very well-intentioned, really want to do good things. Why can they not collaborate and actually, do good things together? Okay, why does it seem to fall apart so often? Okay. Now, there's another list, which is much, much longer. Oh, by the way, the first list has over 30 items on it now. The second list I call dumb people problems. Okay. These are just obvious mistakes people make in communication and collaboration. And that's got about 150 different items on it by now, okay? Those are not the only artifacts I'm coming up with in Collaborology, but those are some of the things I'm trying to test. So things like, oh, well, geez, do people really talk over each other? Do people really listen to each other? Do people really have reputation issues and they want credit for this idea or that idea? Do people have compensation issues? So they fight over grant money or, the next promotion or, passing money under the table, that sort of stuff. All of that stuff affects collaboration and how it can scale. So there's a lot of things that I'm picking up. And one of the reasons we have these sessions is to really learn one of the very first, most fundamental things I think is so key, which is how do we learn to disagree in a civil way? Much disagreement leads to disappointment, leads to conflict, leads to distancing, leads to all kinds of things that don't foster collaboration. So one of the things I'm really, really curious about is what happens in conversation when there's a misunderstanding, when there's a misexpectation, when there's a thing that gets ignored, when someone is talked over, when someone takes too much time, as I've been accused of taking from time to time. And then I really, treat those as case studies for collaborology. Okay. But in the meantime, we're trying to unravel bullshit. So in 2 words, it's how do we unravel bullshit together without letting all of this idiocy that seems to suffice for normal discourse in other media? How do we really just say, hey, we're not going to put up a bullshit. We're going to really dig in and say, does this thing make sense? And so that's my description for this morning with the level of caffeine I've had. That's my version of why we're in this space. Over.
Over. That's funny. Yes, I'm not sure if I've already been using the over protocol. But yeah, no, I generally use the over protocol because I find myself on a tear and then I need to put an end to it, for God's sake. And note, hey, that here endeth the rant. Yeah, no, that's fabulous that y'all are diving deep into such considerations. That's really important work for um, to be able to inform and diagnose, to guide requirements basically for tooling to support us in sense making at scale. Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Of course, we have much sympathy for one another's perspectives in this regard. I shared a link here to some convergence rituals. I've got a bunch more that I'm trying to write up. What I'm encountering in particular, what these are targeted at is actually practices that we collaboration geeks might engage in together to despite the fact that there are so many challenges for us that stand in the way of us collaborating even better. And so some of the barriers that stand between collaboration geeks in adopting one another's technologies, right? There's Rice Bowl is the big one, right? There's to be plain, to the extent that we're dedicated to this pursuit, we're all in with respect to the work that we're doing in this collaboration arena. So our material existence is dependent on some payoff from us doing engaging in these efforts, right? So that's a terrible barrier to for us to overcome. Another one is well, one understands one's own work, and one has faith in what the merits of one's own approach. And so it's going to take a considerable disruption to it's going to take a very, very delicious piece of cheese to distract us from the path that we're already on, right? That's another huge one. There's a whole, I'm sure you've got a very good list of such things. Mine is really only informal at this point. But it's essential that we collaboration maniacs manage to figure out how we can collaborate if we're planning on helping the whole society collaborate, right? So we've got to solve our own problems before we can hope to help the rest of those poor critters get together. So that's why I'm working on curating this collection of convergence rituals, activities that we might perform together in particular, to make it possible for us to experience the merits of one another's technologies, to learn from one another, to learn with one another, various other approaches that can hopefully tear down some of those barriers to us collaborating more effectively. Over.
I know I went on for a long time. Anybody else want to respond before I have a rejoinder? Okay, I'll go. Yes, that is the very core question that either reveals us as having learned anything or whether we're just a bunch of hypocrites. Okay, we say we want to collaborate, but we don't get anywhere. Okay, so yes, there's been that criticism levied at probably every collaboration attempt, but certainly this one. Okay, but therefore I say, ever since mid 2017, which is the beginning of this series of conversations. By the way, they used to be 4 days a week. Now they're 2 days a week. Okay. But they used to be 4. So there's over 800 videos, usually 2+ hours long. Okay. Now posted on YouTube that basically serves as the raw material for any case studies, which I would have to say in 2017 and even earlier, I had faith. This is where I had faith, Jerry, Stacy, Jack. Okay. I had faith that eventually there would be technology that could analyze those videos, do speaker identification, understand who interrupted whom, understand how to pick out, the memes or sentences or ideas contained therein, hook them together, and then make them available for analysis, either for derivative works, papers, books, blogs, whatever, or case studies in collaborology. And there have been many. Kayla mentioned that I drove Josh out of this particular group. We can go into that at length as well. We have many case studies of collaborology that involve Josh and myself in this group going back years. So anyway, we do have, and that's one big objective that I had from the very beginning, was to really see how we communicate, how we collaborate, how we misunderstand, how we interject, how we correct each other, how we use terminology, how we map terminology. And so all of that has been why these things are recorded and then subsequently shared. Before I shut up, I'm going to say a couple more things, okay? I think that whether or not an answer is understandable, in my mind, and this is possibly going to be another tributary we may or may not want to go about, I think there's a very small difference between a statement being understandable and a statement being relatable. And a lot of people mistake relatability for understandability. I'll just say that much there, okay? Now, on merging or mapping mental models, I myself think merging is awesome, if we want to be the Borg. But before we get to merging, there's a very valuable step, which is mapping. If I can map certain ideas of mine to certain ideas of yours, without the entire mental model, but I just do a little bit of mapping, then that begins to create tendrils of connection. And the deeper and the more thick and the more numbers there are of the tendrils, we get closer and closer and closer to mutual understanding. Okay, and I think that mapping is a very valuable, not to be overlooked step before you get to merging. Okay, that'll be one thing that I say there as well. Third thing I'll say is on this prologue business of whether or not you can solve the monkey problem. First comment is, I think crows are remarkably underappreciated. Crows can solve this problem. Secondly, I believe it's not a problem with prologue. It's like the standard joke, okay? If I weigh 30 pounds and the train is coming at me at 50 miles an hour and I'm going east, then what's the price of tea in Timbuktu? It's a matter of what knowledge you're putting into the system, what question you're asking. And if you don't understand that you don't have connectable ideas, connectable memes, it's not the fault of prologue that it can't solve it. Okay? Now, prologue does have limitations. I understand why cut was introduced, okay? But you got to also understand that it's the person who's dealing with it. It used to be called a knowledge engineer, who had to model the problem appropriately in order to really even give prologue a chance. Datalog has a similar problem, but I think it's much more general and much more scalable, and we can talk about that as well. But the third thing I'll say is that when it comes to whether or not these ideas map, like you had this one idea of I think you used two different terms, Jack. They refer to semantics. No, what is it called? Things that mean the same thing. Synonyms, sorry. Which was really why we have in our brains more visual neurons than logic neurons. Okay, because recognition is the first step you need before you can actually have any chance at reasoning. Recognition, is that an alligator, is that a dinosaur, is necessary before you actually get to, more deeper cognition and representation. So I think recognition and saying this mapping of, is this green dot similar to that tree concept that I have in my head? Or is this blue mass similar to this sky concept I have in my head? That mapping is interpretation. Recognition is part of interpretation. And that is a necessary step in intelligence. And that's why strict semantic models of triples or quintuples or whatever you want to call them, without recognizing recognition being the core problem, are going to be frustrated. And in fact, push back and say that's probably why we have description logics. If we don't appreciate yet enough the interpretation and recognition of me. Okay. And then what else can I say? I could say something about utility function, but it's going to go on way too long. Let me just stop there because I just wanted to respond to a lot of open ends that I heard go by. Over. Stacy got her hand up.
Thank you. So I've been here since the very first Collaborology call, which happened after the original GCC, maybe about a year later. I'm not exactly sure, but and I came here for the Collaborology part of it. I want to address, Sam, what you said about, that you were hoping that you'd have the tools and all that, because I understood that. As a matter of fact, when Josh is the one that first said, "Are you going to come?" I thought I didn't have anything to offer because I figured you're all going to be talking about tools and technology and I didn't know anything about it. But he said, "No, you definitely have something to offer. Come." And so I did. What was upsetting to me is while the tools were being in development, the part that I wanted to engage in is to do by hand what you had hoped the tools would do. I didn't want to wait until something was built so that we could start doing what we should be doing. I wanted to do it without the technology. And the issue that I came up against is that I needed what, I don't know if Colin coined this word or Lauren, but a data butler. There were very simple things to do that aren't very simple for me. Like even just like cutting, editing, even just taking a 20-second clip of something for me is a very taxing thing to do. It sounds silly, but it is. It's a stressful thing to do. It doesn't come naturally where somebody like you or Barry, it happens in a second without even thinking about it. So that was what I called the smart people problem in this group, is that people could only see what they were wanting to do and not trying to see where their work would overlap with somebody else's work, where we could all be moving in the same direction while we're still able to engage with our own passions and interests. So again, it's I believe in like doing it until you wind up doing it instead of waiting for something to be completed to do it. Over.
As a bit of a very related history, a fellow named Licklider did not want to wait for AI. So he commissioned Engelbart to invent collaboration. And so Stacy, you're the modern day Licklider.
Well, I think, thank you. That's some name.
I hope Stacy is. The Licklider had access to money and he could fund things.
Well, and that's the other issue, which is a big thing for me, is tackling this problem of control and power. and how it gets diverted to a small group of people that may not be the best people. That's actually what drives me.
And therefore, for the record, all of these videos are shared openly on YouTube. So anybody can actually deal with them. And they're also, by the way, uploaded, most of them anyway, to Drive on Google Drive. So anybody can pick them up and do with it as they wish. So
Since you brought that up, Sam, I think a really fun and good and important idea is if we convene a call to talk about, what protocols around sharing pieces of these videos we might want to make explicit.
let's do that again. I know we've had various attempts at that, and I don't want to dismiss any of them, either those or this particular suggestion. It'd be good to understand what we tried and why that didn't work as well.
Yeah. And maybe even bring people from outside the group in, because it doesn't have to be specific to our group, but just to get the conversation started in terms of, expectations, because different people are going to want to operate using different protocols. And I think it's good to make those explicit, and then you know who you want to work with.
So anyway, that was an answer to your question, Shawn, about what is this group trying to do here on Saturdays and Sundays. That went on for quite a while.
I just replied with a note in the chat here and a link to a little post, a blog post over on noosphere.org about this question. Basically, my contention is that we've gotten to the point in society, what with basically the weaponization of the information space, the information arena. We've gotten to the point of deadlock and constipation. Yeah. So I would submit that, well, I mean, take a look at legislation in the US. When was the last time that a significant piece of legislation was passed? Right? Isn't it multiple presidencies ago now? Right? Hasn't it all been skirmishing and basically slap fights in the cockpit down there?
Dollars or $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill passed. I think that was the last I recall.
Yeah, but you see the point here, right? Is that yeah, and I think I get into it reasonably in the post there. Uh, we've got a whole bunch of existential grade issues that are going to take societal engagement and a whole planet's full of creativity and diligence and execution to be able to address. And I'm not seeing how we're going to be able to tackle the big issues, given that we can't even deal with the little things. And that post gives daylight savings time as an example of we can't even deal with the little things, right? We can't even deal with the little things that have zero political significance and about which no moneyed pushback or manipulation is being expanded, right? And so yeah, I I don't know how we get. I'm not certain we're going to get out of this decade without bad things. And we all know the sorts of bad things that we're worried about. Personally, I'm most concerned about AI and this authoritarianism slash nuclear war thing that we seem to be exploring here at the moment. Yeah, it's looking like within this year we're going to have something like 6 or 8 new nuclear powers. By the way, so yeah, I think that's I think we're sadly in a really remarkable time when it's now possible to make the case and have that case recognized as being prima facie valid. I think the whole society is essentially recognizing that we've gotten to the point of deadlock. Whichever side of the, of diverse arguments we happen to be on, I think we've all gotten to the point of recognizing that progress is pretty much stopped. So this is the market is ready. Let's put it that way. Over.
Not just stopped. We're about to head into a regression. If his cronies, and you know who I mean, are actually carrying through with a demolition of databases, knowledge bases, scientific studies, literature, etc., we're in a modern day Library of Alexandria situation. I'm only hoping that either they or Anonymous are, squirreling away all these different resources for a better day. Let me also say, Heiner, is that feedback? You have two systems? No, you're no longer on.
Does anybody know whether archive.org was able to get itself back up fully?
Oh, I didn't know it was down.
Well, it got attacked a month or two ago, and I'm not sure how deep and effective the attack was, whether it was an existential attack or just a disruption.
That's the preprint arxiv.org.
No, this is
This is Brewster K.
Wayback Machine slash
the Wayback Machine. Okay.
Yeah.
That I don't know about. I mean, I heard it was attacked, but I don't know its state.
Heiner?
We might need to smuggle a mirror out out of San Francisco.
Thank you for this session.
Sorry, go ahead, Heiner.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the session. I found it important in my line of thinking because I know a lot of eggheads, computer systems eggheads out of California, and we even have some people here from the East Coast and from other areas. But what I feel is missing that we really address the problem space to come to a solution space. We were with Josef Weizenbaum and all this Mandelbrot chaos and all these big thinkers, and only few can think back, like Jack or Tony Judge, to when we did it all by hands. And so I'm a little bit in various communities, all these futurists, all these policy guys, all this language terminology UNESCO guys, and I feel this group here is very central to merge with a handful of other groups I have in mind who are also being able back and looking back and looking forward. And so the very basic, well-packed questions of Stacy helped a lot in this group. And I think it will also help to really tackle and trigger what needs to be done, because we are still in a way of systems and syntax and semiotics, but really addressing the issues which are close to living and survival, it needs, I think, a joint stepping back. And maybe we need people again like Tony Judge and others who are very, maybe frustrated, but also very much torn between the millstones of time to really speak up anymore. They're, as I can feel, very understandably totally fed up on how the governance work in the UN civil society or in the Union of Nations, and how we make peace on the family level, on the community level, on the world level. So I feel some of the movers and shakers, I think I can try to bring together, and maybe in this setting or in another setting. But again, let me underline, it's Stacy and the other girl there from California. She's just left, so I cannot see her name. Yes. So we need this really mix of being open and really being aware of the problem spaces, because our solution spaces have to do with the meaning of the known, unknown, and unknowable. And we recently asked Bart, or no, I think it's called Gemini, how to include the unknowable into the curricula for higher education. Funny, funny answers. In a nutshell, I enjoyed the session. Keep on trucking.
Can I respond before you go? I would submit that we've got a situation where there's a oh you're still here a world problematique, this set of interconnected problems that protect one another from solution, right? So it's a it's a it's a vigorous mechanism. It's almost like a living thing, right? And any little piecemeal response to try to pull out what it's like a game of pickup sticks where all these sticks are piled on one another and supporting one another, right? You can't just pull out one. You can't. It's all too complicated, right? Pulling out one, well, it's connected by little springy connections with all the others that are protecting it. So campaign finance in the US is the classic, the personhood of corporations, what is it, the citizen
United.
the
Citizens United.
Citizens United, yeah, political, whereby corporations can have political speech and so on. Basically what we need is we need a thing as big and fractal as the world problematique to take it on, right? We need collective cognitive engagement with the world problematique to be able to grapple with it. And
just to jump
nothing
in,
short of that will do it.
you see the term global problematique or problematique was coined by Eric Jansch in the early
Yes.
days before the Club of Rome. We celebrated 40 years problematique, 50 years. We are now in the 55 years of global problematique, discussing with all the systems people and all the futurists. This is what I meant. Don't blurb another big term like crisis or problematique. Go back where people like Aleko Christakis or John Warfield or whatever have been laying out a plan, and we can see what is missing and then see what kind of systems or tool sets are available.
The world problematique is itself, as presently embodied, it's a cybernetic phenomenon, right? And it needs a countervailing, exponentiatingly potent cybernetic phenomenon to best it. So I'm not sure that the thinkers of the past had access to plausible architectures for such a response.
Let's talk about this another time. These were the fathers of general thinking theory, and all these people were on the verge to include the cybernetics terminology. But it goes back to the basic questions like from Stacy. And so we have to have another session, Sam.
Yeah, yeah. I left a link there for you to set up a meeting with me. Let's do a mind meld, just the two of us have a talk and see if we can establish joint vocabulary.
I just
In
asked to be recorded and shared if you guys are willing.
And yeah, I'll share a link with you all here. I think that there's a special magic in the one-on-one mind meld that isn't possible with Arity's greater, and that's yeah.
I think
Basically each Arity has its own charms, but one-on-one has a particular charm that shouldn't be lost in the fun and engagement and community of larger alternatives. So yeah, no, I truly do invite all of you to hit me up for a call and see if we can understand one another better.
I think you made a remark about smuggling or taking a mirror out of archive.org, Brewster's org. I think the situation is even more urgent and more dire, because I don't know if anybody here noticed, but the Presidio is one of those facilities that the Trump administration is trying to dismantle and sell off. Presidio is where Brewster Kahle set up archive.org.
Isn't the archive at the temple in town?
I don't know, but when I visited Brewster, it was in the Presidio.
Oh, okay.
He may
Yeah,
have moved.
when I did, it was in the city.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't have more than one location, because they're trying to archive the entire web.
Yeah, fair enough.
Vicious endeavor. Okay, that's another point. So just as tendrils, possible connections, okay, this idea of disambiguation and trying to get language, I say this in this form. We each travel with our own language. What the word complete means to you probably means something different to me. What scrum means to you probably means something different to me. What hypocrisy means to me probably means something different to you. So context is 99% of the establishment of meaning. So I think to actually communicate and to recognize that this mapping of terms and words and means has to take place is a necessary step. And if you try to communicate without doing that, almost guaranteed, in my opinion, you're going to end up with misunderstandings and disappointments later on down the road, usually when the cost is much higher. So that recognition is the source of this thing that I call Dictopedia, which is how do we establish a place where I can have my own language, you can have our own language, and our two Dictopedias can begin that process of mutual mapping. So that's Dictopedia. Let me just mention one other, which is this merged mental model is something that, goes under a lot of different names. And I used to think, wow, it's going to be a long time before we can actually do it. But the way I was thinking about it was, I can have a small little model, whether it's about the way the Rubik's Cube works, or whether it's about the way hydrography works in Tennessee, or whether it's the way education has been disgracefully degenerated in the last 5 or 6 decades, okay? Any particular model I have is my own, and it's potentially very specific. The question I ask is, how do we take each of your interests and my interests and find areas where each could mutually benefit each other? Like somebody's food study could benefit from a good hydrography model. Somebody's study about why are there so many idiots and stupid people in society could benefit from a study of how the curricula has been basically controlled for 6 or 7 decades by people with a very, very biased leaning in politics. We can also look at districting and gerrymandering. We can look at whether beliefs are as good as science, the fact that, your belief is as good as that, scientific study. All of this bullshit, needs to have our own little models that can be composable, aggregable, refinable version. And I think that developments like GitHub, developments like Kaggle, developments like Hugging Face, even all these LLMs, I had not anticipated any of this in 2009. I find that disrespectful, Barry. Anyway, I'm just going to not respond to that right now. And I'm only saying this because Shawn is new to this particular session, and I wanted to set some tendrils of possible connection so that we could follow up. So I'm only hoping that you meant that humorously, because if not, then you and I can have a one-on-one on this.
On the back alley, buddy. Okay,
Those
so
Collaborology that are actually collecting here on video in real time. Anyway, those are possible things for us to basically connect on. And there's about 6 total, but anyway, I'll stop there. Over.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I, I, this I'm trying to respond to what you're saying. So hear this in response to that. I would submit, if there's one thing I really want to share here, it's that there's a new paradigm that we need to step into, and that paradigm is moving from a situation, the current situation, where the ideas are all in our heads, and for work to be done, the ideas need to be loaded into our personal individual little meat computers. Okay, we need to move from that paradigm to a paradigm where the ideas are in a container in the cloud, in the merged mental model, and we curate our ideas into the merged mental model. And the merged mental model is a battery, a repository, a source, a store, a stock of of where the action is. That's where humanity's thinking is in a live embodiment of our collective understanding. We need to move to that scenario. And short of doing that, we're just continuing to act like 19th century, 18th century cave people. Okay. We're currently still, you mentioned pages, right? To the extent that we're still dealing with pages, we haven't escaped Gutenberg. Okay, we've got all this fancy technology. We've got bloody a trillion transistors in this bloody phone or close to it. So help me out here. Why in the heck are we still basically doing things the way Gutenberg would recognize? Okay, over.
We don't hear you, Heiner.
Heiner,
Oh,
are you speaking?
we can't hear you, but you're not muted.
Yeah, your mic is not working, it seems. You don't have
Is it working now?
Yes.
No.
Okay, I have an external mic now. No, what you're saying is so exciting, so I could not resist, and I was even away already. We coined with the Council of Europe in '98 the term meta paradigm. I called it the cognitive panorama, to have the coexistence of extensional spheres, scaffoldings, mental models. All this is in various papers with Anthony Judge, and I think we should do it in a shared conversation, not just a one-on-one. It is so great to have this session, and I even have my mic now.
We must connect, and I really want to connect with Tony as soon as possible. I really love his brain. So I don't know how. So I would argue that there's zero possibility of us making progress on the world problematique until basically we're doing something like the MMM. There's simply no way to do it.
You recognize that Doug, way back in the 60s, called it the dynamic knowledge repository. And this is where everything of his, notes, lectures, presentations, email, chats, were in this central, authoritative, shared repository.
Sam, I have to respond. I've got a paper in the works called Text Considered Harmful. Okay. I think text is part of our problem. Okay. So when I say the MMM, it is a knowledge graph. Okay. It is a knowledge graph which hosts the superposition of all of our discordant, mutually incompatible claims, okay? Even ones that are toxic, that are lies, okay? Meant to deceive. It contains all of that, okay? So it's not merely the speech acts, these disposable, transient, ephemeral speech acts that we emit, okay? Including documents, all hypertext. It's got to be beyond that. It's got to be after that, where that material is the source that we might use to extract, to up-semanticize merged mental contents out of. Okay, that's what all our historical great conversation consists of. Is it's ephemera that we might be able to extract the linkable assertions out of. Okay, so we need to move beyond that old stuff. So I don't know whether Doug got that part. I'm not sure that his dynamic knowledge repository was clear about that need. It feels to me like his DKR was the repository for the great conversation, which is this collection of ephemera, as distinct from the MMM, which is our merged, collectively curated understandings. Over.
Okay, Heiner, if I may, let me respond to that, because I can see how the standard reaction to Doug's work is that, okay? Because all he had available, and keep in mind, he pioneered all this, all he had available to him was text, okay? But he clearly saw the value of the richer media that we have today. So if you actually had talked to him about something he called the handbook. The handbook is something most people do not know that Doug was thinking about. But the handbook was, how do you collect all the best learnings, all the best lessons, all the best protocols, all the best guidelines, so that we could actually do things, whether it's tying our shoelaces, or whether it's having a phone call, or whether it's conducting meetings, or whether it's actually writing constitutions. He was all about handbooks. And handbooks included not just text. I mean, he was thinking in such a visionary way that all he had access to and all he could do was text. But he pioneered multimedia, keep in mind, okay? So he had video on a screen. at the time that he was texting and writing documents and outlines, okay? So his vision definitely was not limited to text, and his vision definitely, he talked about annealing, okay? Where knowledge was dynamic. In other words, it was not static. It would, just like a piece of metal or just like an artwork, be annealed over time with new layers, okay? Many people have not heard Doug talk about annealing, knowledge annealing. So he has all of these concepts which presaged a lot of what we're talking about today. Anyway, I just wanted to gently push back on that misconception. Over.
I love Doug. Okay, and I did have the opportunity, all too brief, to mind meld with him a bit, but it could be that he at that point he was a bit too much a great grandpa, and I think his neuroplasticity had was a little stale dated at that point. But uh uh this is beyond we need to do something beyond multimedia, because again, the various media are still ephemera. They are they are our attempts to fling edit suggestions at one another. Okay, today the action is still in, the thinking still happens in our heads. The interconnected, the nodes and their interconnections are in our heads. And while that remains the case, that is a fundamental barrier to the species coming awake to its possibilities. So we need to put that merged mental model, we need to realize, make real that merged mental model for us to be able to break into a new domain, an emergence, engage in an emergence of a new noospheric scale of operation. Over.
Yep. Anyway, this is something that we could go on and on and on for hours. So
Yeah.
I will not try to do that here. I just indicate that that's a very rich ground for mutual exploration. Heiner, you have your hand up. Or was that a artifact from a previous contribution? Okay, I'm gonna wait 3 seconds, then I'm gonna lower your hand.
I can speak up. I grabbed my mic again. I think when we meet maybe tomorrow, like the